Yesterday on the show, we spoke with Chris Fogarty at the Canadian Hurricane Center about the latest on this year's hurricane season. And while Hurricane Lee is the one we're watching right now, Fogarty says we'll be dealing with the legacy of this summer's record heat for months to come.
Water temperatures are quite a bit warmer than normal this year overall in the Atlantic. So when we're putting these forecasts together for Lee, we'll be taking that into account. That might allow Lee to hold on to its tropical character a little bit longer when it does, get up into our neighborhood. Usually the cold water has a cushioning effect for this high winds. So if the water is warmer like it is, you'll tend to get stronger winds at the immediate coastline. We're not really dealing with strong winds during the summer months until we do, of course, get into hurricane season.
If talk of hurricane season and its seemingly relentless parade of potentially problematic storm systems has you feeling a little edgy, you may be experiencing something called eco-anxiety. It is becoming more common among people in this province. Psychologist Dr. Janine Hubbard has been hearing more discussion of it, and she joins us now in studio to talk about it. Good morning, Dr. Hubbard.
Good morning, Chrissy.
Okay, so what exactly is eco-anxiety?
Well, it's a fear related to climate change, to storms, to natural disasters, and it can be very much an immediate personal fear in terms of feeling in danger. It can be fear for loved ones, or it can be more of a global impact and being concerned about what's happening to us as a planet.
And who's most at risk for eco-anxiety?
Certainly anyone with pre-existing mental health issues, particularly anxiety disorders. But we also know that young children can be at risk. Seniors are at risk. Individuals who perhaps have less economic stability, as we saw during Snowmageddon, less ability to prepare in advance and, or the ability to evacuate easily. We see that. And also, again, people who have encountered storms, forest fires, hurricanes, you name it, if they've been involved in it themselves in the past, that obviously can put them at higher risk for even just mentions of upcoming storms.
Yeah. And a lot of people in this province have experienced everything you just mentioned there. Yep. Right. Given all of that, we have so many things that we talk about and label these days. Why is it important to label this particular brand of anxiety?
Well, it's interesting because partly I think it catches us unaware. You and I were speaking about, the interview yesterday, and just at the end of it, just kind of having a slight feeling of unease. And it was only after where I was able to kind of label that emotion and go, oh, that's what I'm feeling and why I'm feeling. And then you can kind of breathe and move on. But if you're seeing images, you're hearing stories, and you're not kind of processing, they just kind of, they're little micro stressors that can, really add up. And yes, we always caution around use of something like anxiety, because I always talk about we can have big A anxiety where it is a major fear. It's a major phobia, or it can be little A anxiety. It's a little bit of a fear, because the flip side of all of us having experienced so many storms, so many natural disasters in this province is we're also aware that you can get through them and come out the other side and be okay.
And like you mentioned, too, you put me into the thought of different coping styles. Mm-hmm. Just talk us through that.
Well, that's an important one for all of us to be aware of, and things hit us differently at different times, depending on how vulnerable we are, how stressed we are, how sleep deprived we might be. But for some people, management of anxiety is all about control. So it's making decisions. It's I want to know hour by hour what's happening to the storm. And if I know it and I can monitor it, that's going to make me feel better because I'm feeling in control of awareness. For others, it's the avoidant coping. It's I'm going to set up a system with a family member or buddy who will text me if I need to know something. And otherwise, repeatedly seeing images or repeatedly hearing warnings is really stressful. So it's kind of knowing what's going to help you best cope with uncertainty. And that's the biggest thing with these hurricanes is they're so uncertain, and we have so many of them that it's, we hear about them for ages, and most of them, nothing happens. But that uncertainty increases that low levels of anxiety in us.
Isn't that, it's so interesting, even the communication style around forecasting, and whether that's from the meteorologists or from media. I think we're having more conversations about it, especially since Snowmageddon. And I'm thinking about, empty shelves, for example. The message itself can be really important. I mean, how do you contemplate that in terms of what the right measure is, Because people need the information, but at what point,
and it is such a tricky balance because you don't want to be overly alarmist because partly then people eventually start tuning out the message.
That's right. One
the
who
boy
calls
who cried wolf.
Yeah.
So it's a healthy balance. And I mean, I like to think that here in the province, we have a healthy respect for the fact that weather changes and that, it is really hard to predict going ahead. So again, one of the ways that we cope with anxiety, as I said, is control. So now is a great reminder for everybody in the province, if you don't have an emergency kit tucked away in the closet somewhere, now's a good time to make sure you've got it. It's kind of like making sure you got your first aid kit. You don't want to have to go scrambling to figure out where the gauze and the bandages are when you've cut your finger. Same thing, middle of the night, you may have all of the supplies, but trying to find them in the middle of a power outage can be a lot more challenging. So taking a few minutes, seeing what is it I have, what is it I need, and I know, again, even preparedness can be really expensive. So if you start at the beginning of the season and pick up items, a couple at a time so that it doesn't feel like, oh my goodness, I've just spent a small fortune on batteries and a new, battery operated radio and filled up the propane tank and, had to run around and do everything last minute. Because also, as we saw with Snowmageddon, that's not financially feasible for a lot of people.
I'm so glad you brought up all those things because I'm picturing the conversation around the table. Maybe it's full family, and we're memories of other, eco events where we were making lists. Oh, I wish I had thought of this. And remember, like propane was a big one for me and the batteries, right? Yeah. Knowing where your flashlight is.
Knowing where your can opener is.
Right. And your wine opener.
Yes. All the important things. What caught me off guard was making sure that I had an adequate supply of dog food.
Ah, yes.
Things that you don't think about because it's like, oh, sure, I'll get that in a couple of days.
Yep.
No, that was something that was really important. And a lot of people were caught off guard with things like prescriptions. I'm as guilty as anybody, leaving it to the last day to go and pick them up. So just some reminders of thinking back and also reframing it. What was the fun stuff?
Right.
What were the things that you actually enjoyed with some forced, staying at home and whether it was without power and pulling out the board games or having a fire or, kind of looking at we can control our anxiety or our fear by being prepared, and we can also prepare for some fun if that's at all feasible.
Is there, healthy way to do that? Like around the table with the family, how would you suggest people have that conversation ahead of whatever's coming next?
Well, it's a combination of you do want to be prepared that if you get an evacuation order, if you get I have to get out of here quickly, that you feel in control. So again, maybe you've gone around and had everybody pack up a bag. Having a central place where you have all your important documents, some extra cash is always a good idea at the best of times because you never know when things might happen. But then really, like I say, looking at if we have to go without power for a couple days, if we, need to be hanging out, what are the things that would be important to us?
What happens if the phones go out? Right? Well, I mean, it's really interesting because unfortunately we do have a lot of experience with this stuff, some more than others. How empowering do you see that being sort of just as a learning tool moving forward as we navigate eco-anxiety? It's a real thing.
Well, and I think the other thing that our past experiences have really brought forward is the idea of community. And is the idea of reaching out. So, we know we had neighbors helping neighbors after storms, but maybe if you're going to the store to pick up some batteries and there's somebody on your street that has more mobility issues or perhaps even, has some financial issues, just reaching out and going, hey, how are you equipped for batteries? I'm going, can I pick you up a package? So again, being proactive as opposed to reactive.
Right. Great ideas. Really appreciate this conversation, Dr. Hubbard.
Anytime.